Okay, so if you're a pitcher stuck in the low 80s and you want to know exactly how I got myself into the low 90s, then this video is for you. In this video, I'm going to walk you through day by day the exact throwing week that I followed, what I did on each day, how hard I threw, and why each day even existed in the first place. This isn't your typical just do long toss and lift. This is a structured weekly system built around intent, recovery, and athletic movement. And yes, this is literally the exact throwing routine that I used to take myself from throwing in the low 80s to throwing in the low 90s. And it's also the same foundational throwing structure that I use with all of the athletes that I coach who are gaining 5 to 10 miles per hour. But getting right into it, let's start with Monday. Okay, so Monday was my first high intent day of the week. After doing a warm up, after doing all my mobility, what I would do is go into a long toss. And on this day, I would try to go out to as far as I possibly could. And the key here is on the way out, you don't want to muscle your throws and throw them on a line. You actually want to throw them pretty high and you want to stay loose as you're moving out in distance. Basically, you want to see how far you can throw the ball with as little effort expended as possible. What I was trying to do was think about letting my hips deliver the upper half and staying athletic as I possibly can. No mechanical cues and no overthinking. The nice thing about long toss is it puts you into an external focus, okay? You're just really focusing on throwing the ball as far as you can and trying to hit your partner at these longer distances. So when you do that and you give yourself an external task, you find that your body can organize a lot more efficiently, but I'll get into that later. Once I reached my max distance for the day, I would do anywhere from 3 to 5 pull downs coming in. And this is where I'd start to throw the ball on a line. Now, with this whole structure, I got a ton of inspiration from Alan Jaeger. I think his approach to long toss is awesome. But when I was coming back in, the only cue, I guess you could call it, that I had was throw it like an outfielder. So, again, with the external task, I wasn't trying to think about my footwork, where my glove arm was, where I needed to get my throwing arm. All I was focused on doing was throwing that baseball like an outfielder. So I visualized myself as an outfielder trying to throw a guy out at the plate. And what this did was keep me super athletic. And then once I was done those pull downs, I would typically throw another 3 to 5, but these were a little bit different. So what I would do is I would get a net or I would throw against the fence and I would have my partner or I would set the pocket radar up on a tripod and I would do sprint pull downs. So these were different than the pull downs I was doing coming in from long toss. These I was just sprinting up as fast as I can and throwing the baseball as hard as I can. And on these throws, I was actually getting velocity numbers, okay? And the reason I was doing these is because I wanted to see what my numbers were week to week because it's very, very hard to gain velocity or get better at anything in that matter if you're not tracking data. So what I did was I would throw my 3 to 5 pull downs, I would get the velo readings, and then I would put them in like the notes app on my phone or something. And I would see week to week how hard I was throwing, if I was going down, if I was going up, if I was staying the same, because then I can go back and I can adjust based on the data that I saw. So that was my Monday throwing. Now let's move on to Tuesday. Okay, so after Monday's long toss and pull down session, my arm was pretty cooked. Okay, so Tuesday was always a recovery day. And what I did was I either played light catch out to like 60 feet, 65 feet, something like that, or I just didn't throw. Okay, but the important thing to remember here is if I didn't throw, I was still moving my arm to some degree. Okay, so that was either through some sort of arm care, some sort of band routine. Okay, doesn't really matter. The point is, I still wanted to move my arm around because what happens is, if you're watching this, your arm has probably been sore at some point. Okay, and instead of just taking the day to play Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatever, you want to actually get the body moving and get the blood flowing to those tissues, because the way that you actually recover, okay, literally the way your muscles recover is by getting new blood to those areas with nutrients that heal and repair those muscles, okay? That's basically what happens. So when you can move your arm around and get that blood flowing, that speeds recovery up. Okay. Contrary to what a lot of people believe in, taking a recovery day just means laying around and doing nothing. You don't want to do this. You want to make sure your arm is moving. Okay. So that's what I did. I would either do light catch or I would go no throw. And another really important thing to remember here is just because it's a recovery day and there's no perceived work being done, it's just as important to take these days serious as it would any throwing day, because these are the days that you actually prepare yourself for the following high intensity days that you will be pushing your body. So if you don't take these days serious, if you just, slack off, don't do anything, or you push it too hard, then you're actually setting yourself back further and you're stalling your progress. Okay. But let's move on to Wednesday. Okay, so if I did everything right on Monday and Tuesday, I was usually pretty recovered come Wednesday. So I would start to build back up the intensity a little bit. So what my throwing actually looked like, I would start with some athletic catch. Okay, this is pretty much the staple of my throwing. Okay, if you've been watching my stuff for a while, you'd know this. But we're going athletic catch here. We're going to move out to about somewhere between 90 to 120 feet, and not really having a ton of intent on these throws. Really what I'm just trying to do is stretch my arm out. And then once I got to about 90 to 100 feet, I would actually throw from my delivery, okay? Because, athletic catch is great. It should be the staple of the majority of your throwing, but we still obviously want to practice the skill we're going to be using in a game, okay? You're not going to be doing shuffle throws off the mound. You're going to be throwing from your delivery. So once I got to this 90, 95, 100 feet, I would throw out of my delivery, but I would still keep the ball on an arc, okay? I wouldn't be throwing, line drives. I wouldn't be throwing 80, 90, 100% at this point. I would still be letting my arm stretch. And once I felt I'd given my arm a pretty good workout for the most part, I would start to work back into 60 feet. And I would actually do somewhere between 3 to 5 pull downs on this day because, like I said before, my arm would be pretty recovered. So I felt good to do some moderate intensity pull downs on the way in. I wasn't throwing as hard as I possibly could. I was just trying to get a little bit of intent behind it so I could still get that overspeed stimulus to some degree. And then once I worked back into 60 feet, typically I'd go into some sort of a flat ground. I would throw from 60 feet. I would mix all my pitches here. This is where I would work. Any new pitches I was trying to work on, this is where I would get that done. So pretty much what Wednesday was for me was a build back up day. Okay, so it was a moderate intensity day. And now I'm going to take you through what I was doing on Thursday. All right, so Thursday was another light day. I would still throw, but it was nothing crazy. Usually 60 to 70 feet of relaxed athletic catch play. Really, all I was doing here was focusing on staying athletic, moving well, and feeling loose because, as we'll get to in the next section, Friday was a velocity day, another high intent day. So all I was trying to do here was reinforce athletic movement, stay loose, and make sure that I felt good for the next day. And one thing that differed about Thursday is that I actually had a little bit more of an emphasis on drill work. So whatever drills I needed to do that addressed my mechanical inefficiencies, I would hammer these on Thursday, okay? And the reason is because Friday I was letting it eat off the mound. So I wanted to make sure these patterns were fresh so I could feel good on Friday. So now we could take a look at Friday. Okay, so come Friday, this was the day I would let it eat off the mound. Personally, this was my favorite day of the entire week. Like, I would go to bed Thursday night and have trouble falling asleep because I was excited to throw on Friday. So what I would do to prepare for my high velocity throws off the mound, I would long toss out to about 75% of my max distance. So for example, I threw the ball about like 350 on long toss. So 75% of that, somewhere around 260. So I'd go out to 260 feet for the day and keep it there. Okay. The reason being is because I knew I had a lot left to give at the end of that throwing day off the mound. And then on the way back in, I was still doing pull downs and they were at 100%. So I would do 3 to 5 coming back in and have the same idea as Monday to where I was throwing like an outfielder. Okay. I wanted to stay athletic on these. I wanted to get a good throw on a line drive to my partner. And then once I was done these, I would rest for a couple minutes and then I would hop on the mound. And most days my velocity pens were capped around 20 pitches. Some days I would go more, but the big thing is on these days I was only throwing fastballs. I wasn't throwing any off speed. This bullpen was just focused on velocity, okay? And I'm not saying you should do this every single time you throw a bullpen. Throughout the year, it should be phased properly, right? So this routine that I've been telling you is more of an off-season routine. But I would throw my 20 pitches or 25, whatever it was, and I would make sure that I tracked every single pitch that I threw, okay? Because going back to what I said earlier in the video, you want to actually track your data, okay? So if you're in this for the long run, you're going to want to see how you're improving over time. And when you hit a plateau, which you inevitably will at some point, you want to know which data points you can adjust, okay? So for example, if you're doing too much on your Wednesday throwing or your moderate intensity days, then you could back that intensity down and then potentially see an increase on your next velo bullpen. So super important, track your data, keep it all in like your notes app, or if you want to make an Excel sheet, doesn't really matter as long as you have it all in one place. But now we're moving on to the weekend. All right, so Saturday and Sunday were pretty much the same. I obviously would be pretty cooked from throwing, 20 pitches as hard as I possibly can the day before. So Saturday, usually just a recovery day, kind of a similar approach as to Tuesday, where I would either play light catch or I wouldn't throw at all. And, if you were paying attention, you would know if I don't throw, I would still do some sort of arm care, okay? We want to get the blood flowing, we want to get the body moving, all right? And Sunday, I would more often throw than not throw, but there were some days where I felt like I needed an extra recovery day, which was completely fine, okay? So Saturday and Sunday were pretty much the same. I would try to throw if I felt good, and if I didn't, I would just do some recovery, some arm care, some band work, and let my body heal, because it was right back to the cycle on Monday. So when you zoom out and look at this entire week as a system, the reason that it works so well is simple. When you're telling your body exactly when to go hard, when to recover, and when to build back up, you're not guessing. You're not chasing random drills. You're exposing yourself to real intent, real speed, and real athletic movement, then giving your arm the space to adapt. This is the same exact approach to throwing with the pitchers inside my athletic mechanics formula who are all adding 5 to 10 miles per hour, because velocity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing the right things on the right days over and over again. So if you're a pitcher who's been stuck at the same velocity for years and wondering why, it's not because you're lazy. It's just because you don't have the right systems in place. And if you want me to build those systems out for you, click the first link in the description below and book a call with me. Talk about where you're at, where you want to get to, and how I can help.